Good morning and a warm welcome to each and every one of you and to our daily learning and praying program, especially important in these challenging times that we are all living through. But I think the point is that we are living through it and we will come through this stronger as a result, please God. So wishing everyone well, firstly, dedicating today's learning in memory of all those that are past and we have Yortzeit today. And we'd like to focus once again on perhaps one of the most enigmatic, and that's saying something, enigmatic episodes in the Sefer of Shemot. We learn about the first encounter between Moshe and God. We know that Moshe was a shepherd wandering, and the Jews have been enslaved in Egypt, and all of a sudden one of the sheep goes astray, and he follows it, and he sees something which is a wonder, something that causes him to turn aside and draws his attention towards it, and that of course is the burning bush. He sees that this bush is on fire, va'enenu ukal, it is not consumed. So he approaches, curious, wanting to see what it is, recognizing there must be something extraordinary about it. And as he approaches, God calls to him. What does he say? Moshe, Moshe, Moses, Moses. And he says to him, Sha'al na'alecha me'al raglecha ki admas kodeshu. Remove Sorry about that. Remove your shoes from your feet, because the ground which you are standing on is hallowed turf. Now, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but imagine you go past a bench. It's always a bench, isn't it? That is wet. It's wet paint. So usually they put a sign on the bench that says, do not touch wet paint. And what do we all do? Okay, I speak for myself. I always go over and I just want to see, is it really wet or not? I don't know what it is, but something makes me touch it. But the point of the sign is that you should not touch it, that you shouldn't come to overstep the mark. Now, this makes sense. The idea is to avoid the avoidable. So the question we have is, God seems to do things in reverse order here. What does he do? He says that waits for Moshe, as it were, to step onto this holy soil where the burning bush is taking place, where God's presence is. And then what does he do? Moshe is standing there and he says, oh, you need to take your shoes off. You know why? Because the ground which you're standing on is holy. It should have been the exact opposite. First, you tell Moses to take his shoes off before he reaches the holy, sanctified ground of God's presence. Why did God seemingly let him walk on it? And only afterwards did he tell him, oh, by the way, you need to take your shoes off because you're standing on hallowed turf. I remember my grandmother, she should rest in peace. I remember that she had the previous generation, they used to have their ways, and we were never allowed to go up the stairs to her flat with our shoes on. It was one of those things. And she had like a sheet that she spread over the carpet, and she was very particular about it. And I remember that there was, it was like, it was a golden rule. There was no question. You would never go on the stairs with your shoes. Moshe seems to do the opposite here. What happened? I'm going to share with you a true story that I've mentioned before. Good morning, Andrew. Good morning, all those that are joining us this morning. Wonderful to see so many people as we have the winter break, as I like to call it. So let me tell you a true story, extraordinary story, and well documented, and that I think will answer our question. It was in the early 1920s, and there was a man called Silas Hardoon. Remember the name, Silas Hardoon. He was a Sephardic Jewish millionaire who lived in China. He didn't have any children, and he was very wealthy, and he began to give his money away money away to all different Chinese charities. And one night he had a dream. His father came to him in a dream and he implored Silas to do something for his people. Silas shrugged it off next day, didn't think anything of it, right? He said, it can't be of any significance, this dream. It's only a dream because after all, there are hardly any Jews in any case in the whole of China in the 1920s. But the dream persisted. He kept having the same dream. His father came to him in a dream and said to him, Silas, do something for the people. So eventually he decided to act. And he went to the Chacham, the rabbi, Sephardic rabbi known as Chacham Ibrahim. And he was the leader of the very small Chinese Jewish community in the 1920s. And the Chacham's advice, friends, sounded even stranger than the actual dream. So he told the dream about his father coming to him and telling him that he should do something for his people. What did the Chacham say? Bearing in mind, they're scratching for a minyan. There's hardly anyone living there in the 1920s. The Chacham said he should take part of his wealth and he should build a magnificent palatial synagogue. And he specified there should be 400 seats. 400 seats, a beautiful dining room, a beautiful kitchen, and he should build it. And Silas is absolutely baffled. At the end of the day, there was no one there. No one was going to use it. We're talking about the 1920s. There were no Jews in China. There was barely a minyan. So anyways, he listened to the Chacham, he listened to the rabbi, and he followed to the letter, and he named the shul Beit Aharon in memory of his father. A few years later, Mr. Hardoon passed away, leaving barely a minyan to enjoy this magnificent edifice, this shul that he'd built. And in 1940, let's fast forward, 20 years later, 1940, so you may have seen the film that we showed on Tisha B'Av, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, about Sempo Sugihara. He was the Japanese consul to Lithuania, and I actually knew somebody who contacted him and arranges this, a Dutch gentleman, called Mr. Guthand, was it Gutvich, Mr. Gutvich? And anyway, Sugihara issued thousands of visas for the Kovna Jews to take refuge in Japan on the way to Curacao. And the reason why they were prepared to issue, why he was able to issue it, is because Japan didn't see, because it was just a transit visa, they didn't see it that there was going to be a problem. They weren't going to stay there, and therefore they issued the visas. Now, included in that group of those thousands of visas that were issued was the Mir Yeshiva. We've got to imagine before the war, 1920s, 1930s, Europe was being decimated. It was literally, the final solution was in full flow, and there were very few yeshivas that survived. Most of them were liquidated. All of the bochrim, the yeshiva bochrim, were killed, murdered, and there was one group that had a good chance or tried to escape, and that was the Mir Yeshiva, from Mir. And they managed to get these visas, and they arrived in Kobe. They were transported to Shanghai, and they remained in Shanghai for the rest of the war. And when they were in Shanghai, to their amazement, they had and found the perfect place for them to study and for them to be able to stay. Where was it? It was Bet Aaron, the synagogue that had been built in the 1920s by Silas Hardoon as a result of this dream that he should do something for the Jewish people as a result of hearing the dream from his father. And the building had exactly enough seats to house all the students for the 5 years during the war. And they were able, these students of the Mir Yeshiva, to survive. 400 of them survived, and they managed to survive the ravages of war, and eventually they made their way from Shanghai all the way to Jerusalem. It's extraordinary. And just to give you a postscript, How many students do you think the Mir Yeshiva has today? This was the only yeshiva that remained intact through the Holocaust. Over 5,000 students. 5,000 students. And that all came about, or at least in part, because of Silas Hardoon and wanting to do that little bit. When he thought there was nothing, what could he do? What would be the point in building a building? Let's go back now, and then we can understand Moses. We can understand perhaps about Moses and about life in general. Moses was told, take your shoes off, because the ground that you are standing on is holy. Why wasn't he told before he stood on the ground to take off his shoes? And the answer, quite simply, friends, is because the ground only became holy when Moses stepped on the soil. It was ordinary soil. But by Moses stepping forward, committing to engage with the Shekhinah, with the divine presence, committing to take on the mantle of leadership of the Jewish people and to eventually help bring about their salvation, that turned that ground into holiness. Who would have known something so ordinary, and yet it was transformed and became extraordinary? That was what Moshe was able to, that's what God demonstrated to Moshe. Moshe, the same way this ground can become holy, can be transformed just by you stepping on it, so it is that you can transform. You can be the messenger, the emissary to bring about a transformation in the lot of the Jewish people, and thereby bring about their salvation. And therefore, the message is clear, be it from Moses, Mr. Hardoon, or our own lives, that we shouldn't underestimate our actions and the contribution that we not can, but we must make. Every step that we take, every step closer to the Shekhinah, to the divine presence, through acting in a godly way, we can elevate this world. Every step we take, we can transform it into Admas Kodesh, to holy soil, and therefore we can make our lives, infuse our lives and those around us with something eternal, something meaningful, something fulfilling, as opposed to living a life where it's so meaningless and futile and everything seems like has no significance and no purpose and everything's happening by chance. That is the message of Moses. And that's the message of Mr. Hardoon. He had a dream. In his wildest imaginations did he think, this secular Jew, that he would be able to house a yeshiva which eventually would bring about a renaissance in Jerusalem of the Mir Yeshiva, the greatest yeshiva today in terms of numbers and size and what they're accomplishing there? Of course not. He would have laughed had you said that to him in 1920. And yet, a secular Jew did just that. Never underestimate what we and you can achieve. Sha'al nalecha. Start to take off your shoes. Remove the barriers to kedusha, to sanctity. Remove those barriers in your lives, that mindset that's telling you that you can't do things, that you shouldn't aim for the stars. Because the reality is, Admas Kodesh, God is walking with us, guiding us every step of the way. Whatever you want to do, you can do. The only thing that limits you is you. Wishing you all a great day. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Take care.